Hello everyone, and welcome back. Out here on the loneliest roads in the world, truckers carry more than cargo. We carry nights we don't talk about, moments that stayed with us long after the engine cooled, moments that changed the way we look at the dark. If you're here, it means you're ready to ride with us again. Down the highways where radios go silent, headlights catch things that shouldn't be there, and every mile has its own secret. Before we roll into tonight's story, make sure you subscribe so you never miss another true trucker nightmare. And when it's over, drop a comment and tell me what you think really happened out there. Alright, let's shift into the dark. I've been out on the road close to 20 years now. I've seen rollovers, storms that turned daylight into midnight, and wrecks that still show up in my dreams if I let my mind wander too long. But there are only two stretches of highway I still refuse to run at night. One of them is the run between Eerie and Dead Man Pass. That night, I was in a white 579 Pete with a Thermo King hanging off the back of a reefer trailer, 53 foot, loaded with frozen meat bound for Boise. It was early winter, that time when the desert doesn't look cold until you step outside and feel how fast it steals the warmth out of your fingers. I left Eerie just after midnight, topped off with burnt coffee and a stale donut from the truck stop that always smells like fryer oil and pine sol. My logbook was clean, I'd had my 10, and the plan was simple. Clear the loneliest part of the route before dawn, slip over Dead Man Pass, and hit the receiver yard mid-morning. By 3 a.m., I was alone in a way that only truckers really understand. No taillights, no headlights in my mirrors, just my beams cutting a tunnel through the black, the soft white rectangle of my dash glowing against my chest, and the steady hum of the reefer unit thumping through the cab like a second heartbeat. The CB was quiet. Channel 19, dead. Not even late-night nonsense from bored drivers. Just a soft hiss under everything, like a distant fan. The kind of silence where you start to hear your own thoughts too loud. I remember glancing at the clock. 3:17 a.m. The outside air temperature on my dash read 28 degrees Fahrenheit. No wind. The sand on the shoulders lay perfectly still, like somebody had ironed the whole desert flat. I was rolling about 65, cruise control on, both hands resting light at the bottom of the wheel. I had that weird, floaty feeling you get on a long straightaway when the world narrows down to lines of paint and the faint vibration under your feet. That's when the sky changed. It didn't happen like lightning, no flash, no buildup. One moment it was just a dead black desert sky with a few cold stars. The next, it was washed in this bluish-white glow, brighter than my high beams, but somehow soft, like someone had turned on a giant LED panel above the world. The road, the scrub, my hood, everything picked up this pale, hospital-light color. My headlights suddenly looked weak, pointless, like they weren't doing anything. I eased my foot toward the brake pedal, not hitting it yet, just ready. My first thought was aircraft, maybe a chopper real low or some kind of flare. Then I saw them, 3 orbs, floating just above a low ridge off to my left. They were spaced almost evenly apart, about the height of tall floodlights, but there were no poles, just spheres of bluish-white light hanging there. They weren't flares. Flares flicker, drip, and smoke. These things were perfectly round, perfectly steady. No strobing, no blinking markers like you'd see on a plane. Just 3 silent, unmoving eyes staring down at the highway. I killed the cruise and let the truck bleed off a little speed. Probably some kind of drill. I told myself out loud, just to hear a human voice. Maybe the guard. New tech. Whatever. I reached over and tapped my GPS screen. It went black. A second later, my dash lights dimmed, then flickered. The radio cut out completely. The reefer unit behind me coughed just once, and then powered back on like it had sneezed. "Ah, come on," I muttered, tapping the dash again. The CB, which had been quietly hissing, let out a sound that did not belong in that cab. It started as static, then warped into something like a low animal growl. Not a channel click, not interference. This thing had depth. You could feel it in your chest. A long, drawn-out rumble that rose and dropped in pitch like something deciding whether or not to speak. My hand froze halfway to the mic. The hairs on my arms stood up inside my jacket. My tongue went dry. The wheel felt slick under my palms, even though I knew my hands weren't sweating yet. I looked back toward the ridge. The orbs were gone. The sky stayed that weird, pale blue for a few seconds longer, then faded back into normal desert black. My headlights suddenly looked bright again, carving the night in front of me. The dash lights steadied. My GPS rebooted with its little chime. The reefer unit hummed like nothing had happened. I would have chalked it up to fatigue, bad wiring, 100 logical things, except for what I saw in my mirrors. All 3 orbs were now behind my trailer, low, close to the asphalt, drifting along like they were tied to my rig by invisible strings, just out of reach of my taillights. I watched them dance in the convex mirrors, 3 ghostly marbles gliding over nothing. No shadows, no dust kicking up, just pure, cold light. "Breaker 19, I said, voice low, thumb pressing the mic. "Anybody out here between Ely and Deadman? You seeing anything strange in the sky?" The channel hissed back at me. Then, under the static, I heard that sound again. It wasn't like a voice coming through a bad signal. It was behind the sound, a layered, throaty noise that pulsed and shifted, like something big exhaling right against the mic too close, too wet. I dropped the handset into its cradle like it had burned me. "Faulty radio," I told myself. "Bad ground. No big deal." I didn't believe it. The orbs rose a few feet in my mirrors, then dipped closer to the trailer doors, almost curious. They matched my speed perfectly. I sped up. So did they. I braked lightly. They slowed with me, staying just at the edge of my red lights. That's when the first thump hit. Came straight down onto the roof of the cab, right above me. Not a small sound. A heavy, solid impact that vibrated the entire frame of the truck. It felt like somebody had dropped an engine block from 10 feet up. The steering wheel jerked in my hands. Coffee sloshed in my cup holder. My heart slammed against my ribs so hard I had to bite the inside of my cheek to stop myself from swearing out loud. Before I could process it, a second impact hit a few feet back, toward the sleeper. The truck shuddered again, suspension complaining, mirrors quivering. I was still doing 60, middle of a dead-straight highway. There is nothing and no one that should be able to land on your roof at that speed. Not without wind, noise, chaos. I didn't hear any wind-up. No helicopter rotors. No rotors, no rotor wash, no buffeting. Just those 2 hits like something had dropped out of the sky and found its footing on my moving rig. My first instinct was purely mechanical. Keep it between the lines, don't overcorrect. My second instinct was older, an animal thing that screamed at me to get out from under whatever was above me. I white-knuckled the wheel and eased off the throttle, eyes flicking from the road to the mirrors and back. The orbs behind the trailer were climbing now, rising slowly over the doors, tracing invisible arcs in the air. They weren't following the truck anymore. They were circling it. A slow, scraping sound started above my head. Not metal on metal, more like something rough being dragged over the dust on the cab roof. Careful, methodical strokes, front to back, back to front. Every pass made the hairs on my neck creep higher. Up ahead, I saw a turnout. A narrow gravel patch cut into the right side of the road, just big enough for a rig to nose into. My brain did the math. If whatever was up there wanted me to stop, stepping into their little trap was the worst possible idea. But I didn't feel like I had options anymore. I hit my turn signal out of habit, even though I was the only soul for miles, and started easing over. The scraping overhead stopped mid-drag. For a heartbeat, the only sounds were my tires crunching onto the shoulder rumble strip and the low drone of the reefer. Then something moved across the roof. You can tell the difference between vibration and weight. Ask any driver. This was weight. A concentrated, deliberate shift, like a large animal walking from the back of the cab toward the front, each step sending a subtle shift through the suspension. 1, 2, 3, right over my head. I pulled into the turnout and braked hard, bringing the rig down to a rough stop. The orbs froze in place just off my passenger side now, hovering maybe 20 feet out, like stadium lights watching a play. I killed the engine out of instinct. Sudden silence hit the cab like a slap. No motor, no road noise, just the ticking of hot metal cooling and the faint distant hum of the reefer idling on its own system. I sat there, hands on the wheel, breathing shallow. The air inside the cab felt compressed, thick. Every instinct I had screamed not to open the door, not to look. Above me, something shifted again. A long, dragging stroke from front to back, heavier this time. Then nothing. If you've ever sat under a bridge while a train passes overhead, you know that feeling of sound traveling through structure instead of air. That's what it felt like. Like something had leaned its weight onto the roof, listening through the metal. I don't know how long I stayed frozen like that. 30 seconds. A minute. Long enough for my fingertips to go numb from how tight I was gripping the wheel. Finally, I forced myself to move. I grabbed my mag light from the door pocket, clicked it on, and cracked the driver's door open just enough to slip out. The cold bit into my face immediately. The desert smelled like dust and exhaust and something else I couldn't place. Like hot electronics after a power surge. The orbs were still there, hovering quietly off the shoulder, their light washing over the truck. Up close, they weren't flat. They had depth like fog trapped inside glass marbles. I craned my neck and looked up at the roof. The first thing I noticed was the dust. Even if you wash your truck regularly, the desert gives you a fine coat whether you want it or not. That night, it had settled on the roof in a thin, even layer. Across that layer, starting near the driver's side front edge and dragging all the way back toward the sleeper, was a single long mark. For parallel grooves, each about an inch wide, cut cleanly through the dust. They ran perfectly straight like whatever had made them had steady, unwavering limbs. At the end of the drag, there was a slight curve, as if the hand or paw or whatever had flexed before letting go. I walked around the front of the truck, my boots crunching in the gravel. The orbs didn't move, but I could feel their light on the side of my face, cold and clinical. I aimed the flashlight at the ground beside my steps. That's when I saw the prints. They started just behind my cab, in a patch of undisturbed sand where nothing should have been. No approach marks, no tire tracks, just a first print. Each one was maybe 2.5 feet long. Not boot-shaped, not paw-shaped, more like a stretched hand. 3 thick forward pads, 1 backward like a thumb set too low. No claws visible, but the impressions were deep, like whatever owned them was heavy. They led away from the truck in a straight line, heading out into the dark open desert. No hesitation, no wandering. Each step the same distance apart, as if it had landed on my roof, ridden me until I stopped, then stepped off and walked away. I followed them with the beam until they disappeared into the darkness beyond the reach of both my mag light and those hovering lights. I thought about going farther. Some stupid, curious part of me wanted to know what I'd find if I walked that line out. But the rest of me, the part that's kept me alive through blizzards and drunks and blown steer tires, told me loud and clear, "Get back in the truck." I listened. By the time I climbed back into the cab and slammed the door, my hands were shaking hard enough that the keys jingled against the column. I didn't bother with the engine at first. I just sat there, staring at the orbs through the windshield. One by one, they dimmed. Not all at once. The one closest to my nose faded first, then the middle, then the furthest, like someone turning down dimmer switches in order. When the last one went out, the world snapped back to real darkness, so complete that my headlights, when I finally turned the truck over and flipped them on, almost hurt my eyes. The CB crackled once, just a quick burst, then went back to regular static. The GPS rebooted fine. No errors. No alerts. If you looked at my dash, you'd think nothing had happened. I pulled out of that turnout and didn't stop again until first light touched the horizon and I could see other vehicles on the road. I didn't hit the brakes hard, didn't call the cops, didn't radio anyone about UFOs. I just drove. At the receiver, the yard guy did his usual walk around with his clipboard. I sat in the cab, staring straight ahead, trying not to think about what he'd see on the roof. He came back to my window, smacking the side of the trailer with his palm. "You pick up some kind of branch out there?" he asked. I blinked at him. "What?" "Roof's got some marks on it," he said, "like something dragged across the dust. Big. Didn't dent anything, so I'm not banging you for damage. Just looks weird." I forced a laugh and signed his paperwork, hands steady again by sheer willpower. Later that afternoon, sitting in a diner with better coffee and real food, I checked my dashcam footage on my laptop. At 3:17 a.m., the video glitched. There's a clean shot of empty highway, then 6 seconds of distorted bluish smear, like the lens had been dipped underwater, then normal footage again. The audio at that exact timestamp is just one long, low rumble that doesn't match the engine, the road, or anything else I can identify. I've run a lot of miles solo since that night, but I've never taken a load that puts me between Ely and Deadman Pass in the dead hours again. Out there, on that stretch, sometimes the sky doesn't belong to you. And sometimes, for a few miles, neither does your truck. I've been hauling freight across Nevada for most of my life. It's a different kind of quiet out here, wide, empty stretches of sunburnt asphalt, heat shimmering off the blacktop, the kind of stillness that feels more like a held breath than peace. I was running a northbound load toward Tonopah the day it happened. Early summer, temperature outside hovering around 104 degrees Fahrenheit. Even with the AC fighting hard, the cab still smelled like hot plastic, dust, and the stale coffee I'd spilled on the mat 2 days earlier. It was around 2 p.m., worst time to be on that stretch. The sun hits the road just right and turns the horizon into a river of shining false water. Mirage season. I'd driven through thousands of them, but only one ever stared back. I was rolling steady at about 58 miles per hour, cruise set to save fuel. The highway ahead rippled like it was melting. The heat waves rose off the road in slow, ghostly curtains, silver distortions that moved like something alive. Then I saw him. At first just a shape inside the mirage, thin, vertical, wrong-colored against the desert dunes. My eyes narrowed, adjusting to the glare. Then the shape sharpened into a man, barefoot, pale, arms hanging loosely at his sides. Long dark hair stuck to the sides of his face like it had been wet, then dried in the sun. He stood right at the edge of the road, staring at me. Not waving, not gesturing, just staring. I eased off the throttle. Could have been a stranded hiker. Could have been heat stroke. People do stupid things in the desert all the time. I brought my rig down to 40, trying to make sense of what I was looking at. But as I rolled closer, something felt off. He wasn't sweating, wasn't shielding his eyes, wasn't moving at all. Not even the tiny fidgets humans do without thinking. He was frozen, perfectly still. When I got about 30 yards out, everything shifted. I saw his outline blur just for a fraction of a second, like an old VHS tape catching static. Then he evaporated. Not walked away, not stepped into the ditch, just blinked out of existence. 1 second he was there. The next second the space he occupied was empty desert air. I stared so long I drifted onto the rumble strip. The rig buzzed under me, snapping me back. I muttered to myself, heat hallucination. Gotta be. I checked my mirrors. Nothing behind me but boiling heat and distant pavement. I drove on. 30 minutes later, I nearly slammed my brakes. There he was again. Same man, same posture, same staring face, same exact spot. It wasn't possible, but he stood there like I'd circled back without realizing it. This time I didn't slow down. As I passed him, the air inside my cab changed in an instant. The AC vents blew out frigid air. Not cool, not cold. Frigid, like a freezer door had opened. Frost crawled across the lower corners of my windshield, delicate patterns forming in seconds. My breath fogged out in front of me. I shivered so violently my teeth clacked. And that's when he moved. Not naturally, not like a person would. His head turned sharply, too sharply, like someone had snapped a mannequin by the jaw. The motion was wrong, mechanical, almost digital, like watching a frame skip. His face angled toward me as the truck passed, and I swear the expression didn't change. Blank, hollow, unblinking. I kept going, hands locked on the wheel, heart hammering so loud it drowned out the engine. 10 seconds passed. Then I heard it. Breathing. Not mine. Not the soft rumble of the AC. Breathing coming from right behind my seat. Slow, wet, ragged, like someone with cracked lungs was dragging air through their teeth. I froze. Didn't turn. Didn't check the sleeper. Didn't move at all except for my foot staying pinned to the accelerator. The breathing grew louder, close enough I could feel the faint tremor of it against the back of my neck. It wasn't human. Not in rhythm. Not in sound. Something was trying to breathe. Not because it needed to, but because it was learning how. I drove that truck faster than I should have on that stretch. Didn't speak. Didn't pray. Didn't dare look at the mirror. Just drove. By the time I hit Goldfield, the breathing had stopped. My cab temperature returned to normal. The frost melted into thin rivulets down the glass. I rolled into an empty gravel turnout near an old gas station and parked crooked, too frazzled to care. Air brakes hissed sharply, echoing in the hot stillness. I sat there for a full minute before I built up the nerve to look behind me. The sleeper was empty, but the smell, a faint, dusty scent hung in the air, like old clothes left in a desert cave for years. Then I noticed the passenger seat. Footprints. Bare. Dusty. Small. Like a man's foot, but narrow, pale. The toes long and slightly curled like he didn't know how to stand on them. The prints were arranged in a line, each one slightly above the last, leading upward, as if he had climbed something invisible. The last footprint ended halfway up the passenger door, and then nothing, like he had stepped into, or vanished again. I touched the highest print. It was ice cold. Outside, the desert burned at 100 degrees. Inside my cab, that footprint felt like it had been left by something that didn't care about temperature or gravity. Something that moved however it wanted, whenever it wanted. I wiped the seat down with a rag, but the cold remained long after the dust was gone. I didn't sleep that night, didn't close the curtains, didn't shut off my interior lights. The desert outside was too bright, too empty, too silent. The next morning, I told a guy at the fuel stop about what I saw. He didn't laugh, didn't smile, didn't dismiss it. He just said, "You're not the first one to see him. Folks call him the Mirage Hitcher. Been around since the 80s. People swear he's a warning. Others think he's looking for something he lost." He took a sip of his coffee, eyes drifting toward the shimmering highway. Or maybe he's just stuck in the heat forever. Doesn't know he died. Doesn't know he's in the wrong place. I left without finishing my coffee. There are places in Nevada I still drive. Tonopah, Goldfield, Warm Springs. But I don't look at mirages anymore. Not because I'm scared of seeing that man again. Because I'm scared he'll see me first. And this time he won't evaporate. He'll climb. My name's Carter. 26 years on the road, mostly in the Southwest Nevada, Arizona, New Mexico. If you've ever driven the lonelier stretches out here, you know the silence hits different. It isn't the kind that relaxes you, presses on your chest, makes you aware of how small you are under a sky big enough to swallow anything. That night I was taking the long way between Alamo and Tonopah, running Highway 375, the Extraterrestrial Highway. I was hauling empty crates in a Freightliner Cascadia that rattled louder than it should when the wind hit it just right. The dash vibrated. The floor buzzed. The CB hissed. I remember the temperature too, 61 degrees Fahrenheit outside, dry and still. The kind of desert calm where even the sand looks frozen mid-wave. It was around 1:40 a.m. when the loneliness started to settle into my shoulders like weight. No traffic. No animals. Not even a distant set of headlights. Just the dark highway and my beams cutting through it in a perfect tunnel. I tried finding a radio station, something to break the silence. Nothing. Just soft static. I leaned back in the seat, thumb tapping the CB channel. Breaker 19. Anybody out here on 375 tonight? A long breath of static answered. Then under it I heard something new. Faint. Thin. Like someone whispering underwater. "Help me." I froze. The sound wasn't a glitch. It wasn't interference. This had depth. Distance. A human throat trying to form words through pain. I thumbed the mic again. "If someone needs assistance, speak up. What's your location?" Static. A long stretch of it. I tried to convince myself it was just skip signal bouncing from God knows where. Happens all the time in the desert at night. The air does strange things. Then the voice came again, clearer. You're the only one who can see me. My stomach tightened. The wheel felt slick under my palms. I scanned the road ahead, leaning forward, eyes cutting through the mirage-like shimmer hovering over the asphalt. That's when I saw the wreck. A pickup, tan or gray, couldn't tell in the headlights, crushed in the front, hood folded up like crumpled paper, steam drifting off the radiator. It sat crooked on the shoulder, passenger side facing the highway. Fresh. Too fresh. No dust settled on it yet. No hazard lights. No movement. I grabbed the CB mic again. I see a wreck at mile marker. Looks like 27. Dispatch, you got anything? Nothing. Then a soft whisper, right in my ear. Stop. Please stop. Not through the speaker. Behind me, inside the cab. My blood turned cold. I flicked my eyes to the passenger seat. Empty. Sleeper behind me, empty. No one hiding. No open doors. Just the dark cab smelling like stale coffee and hot plastic. Logic said keep driving. Highway patrol would find it. Someone else could report it. But my foot eased onto the brake. Old instinct. Truckers don't leave people bleeding on the side of the road. I pulled onto the shoulder, gravel crackling under the tires. Killed my high beams. Put on hazards. The desert went quiet except for the ticking engine. The wreck was maybe 20 yards ahead. I stepped out. Warm desert air hit me first. Then the metallic smell of coolant cooking on the crushed radiator. My boots crunched the gravel. The pickup's door was open, hanging crooked. The interior light flickered weakly. No one inside. But the ground told a different story. Deep drag marks carved into the dust. Not footprints. Not someone crawling away. These marks had a rhythm, spaced evenly, like something pulling a body backward on all fours. Claw-like grooves at the edges. Deep ones. They led straight into the dark desert brush. My throat tightened. I reached for the flashlight clipped to my belt. The beam cut through the dark, lighting busted glass and the black smear of leaked oil. Then the radio in my cab screamed. Not static. Not interference. A man's voice. Raw, hysterical, tearing itself apart with terror. Don't let it take me. Don't let it. The speaker blew into white noise so loud I ran back toward the truck without deciding to. I yanked the door open. The cab lights flickered. The voice came again, softer now. It's coming back. The CB light blinked once, then died. Silence. I stared at the radio for a long time, waiting for something. Anything. Even static would have been comforting. Nothing. I slammed the door, put the truck in gear, and pulled hard back onto the road. My pulse was thudding so loud it felt like it shook the wheel. I kept checking the mirrors. Every shadow looked wrong. A few miles up the highway, the temp inside my cab dropped 5 degrees in seconds. Fog crept along the bottom edge of my windshield. From the inside, like breath. My teeth started chattering even though the vents blew warm air. Then something shifted behind me. Slow. Heavy. Like weight settling on the sleeper bunk. I didn't turn around. Didn't even breathe. The air filled with a sound like someone dragging their nails lightly along fabric. Moving closer. Inch by inch. Slow. Careful. I whispered to myself, it's just the suspension. Just the road. But the road was flat. Smooth. Nothing that would make that sound. The breathing started next. Ragged. Wet. Too close. I gripped the wheel so hard my knuckles hurt. The highway lines flicked under my headlights too fast. My foot was pressed nearly to the floor and I hadn't realized. Something brushed my shoulder. Cold. Light. Almost curious. I swallowed hard and forced my voice out. What do you want? The answer came from the back of the cab, low and distorted, like a voice being forced through a broken speaker. You stopped. My chest tightened. The breathing grew louder, then cut off abruptly, like it had been sucked out of the air. The temperature snapped back to normal. Warm vents, clear windshield. Whatever had been there wasn't anymore. I drove until the sky started turning pale over the horizon. Pulled into Goldfield, parked crooked in the lot of a diner that hadn't opened yet. Sat there until the sun was fully up. When I finally stepped out into daylight, my legs felt like wet sand. I opened the passenger door to grab my jacket and froze. On the seat, pressed into the fabric, were bare footprints. Dusty, smudged, human-shaped, but too long in the toes, too deep in the heel. They led upward along the backrest and faded into nothing. Later that morning, I called Highway Patrol and reported the wreck. They ran the mile marker twice, even checked aerial footage. Nothing. No wreck, no drag marks, no disturbance on the shoulder at all. The dispatcher asked if I was sure I hadn't been tired. Maybe misread the mile marker. I didn't argue. I just thanked her and hung up. I still drive the Southwest, but I avoid 375 after midnight. And I keep my radio volume low, real low, because sometimes, just under the static, I still hear breathing trying to push through. And every time, I keep driving, because I know now, some voices on that highway don't want help. They just want someone to stop. I've been running freight through Nevada for most of my career. There are highways out here that feel like they don't belong to the rest of the country. Roads where the map says you're still in America, but the night sky tells you something else owns the land. One of those places is the stretch near Devil's Throat Canyon. Locals won't camp near it. Some won't drive it after dark. I always figured that was desert superstition, until the morning everything changed. It was just before dawn, that dead blue hour where the sky looks bruised and the cold comes in tight waves. I was hauling dry goods in a 2019 Kenworth T680, light load, smooth ride. The heater kept a steady warmth in the cab, mixing with the smell of burnt coffee from a thermos I'd refilled back in Rachel. The tires hummed low on the cracked asphalt, the kind of rhythm that keeps you alert but calm. My mirrors were empty, no headlights ahead or behind for at least an hour. The only sound besides the engine was the soft static of my CB. I kept it on low volume, habit more than anything. Out here, you hear less talking and more unexplained bursts of static when the air gets cold enough. The sign for Devil's Throat Canyon appeared on my right, weathered, bullet holes through the first O. Population? None. Warnings? Plenty. I took a sip of my coffee, eyes flicking to a thin figure standing at the shoulder. At first, I thought it was heat haze playing tricks again, except there was no heat. Just frost clinging to the ground and a faint wind stirring up dust. The figure lifted an arm, waving. I eased off the throttle. As the truck rolled closer, the details sharpened. A woman, mid-30s maybe, long hair tangled with grit. Denim jacket faded into a color between gray and sky. She looked like she'd walked straight out of a ghost town. She wasn't frantic, not crying, just desperate behind the eyes. I pulled up beside her and leaned toward the passenger window. "You all right, ma'am?" Her voice barely carried over the engine. "My husband. He never came out of the canyon." A beat. "I need to get to town." Her words hit quick and clipped, like she'd repeated them many times. Against every instinct telling me no, I unlocked the passenger door. She climbed in without a sound, closed the door gently, folded her hands on her lap. Dirt under the nails, jacket torn at one shoulder. "Nearest town is over an hour," I said as I eased back onto the road. "We'll get you help there." She nodded once, slow, eyes locked on the window. For the first 15 miles, she didn't speak, didn't shift, barely blinked, just stared outside like she was listening to something moving alongside us in the dark. A few times I checked the mirrors. Nothing but endless desert. "You from around here?" I finally asked. She didn't turn her head. "We lived near the canyon, hiking. He went in at dusk. She stopped, swallowed dry. "He didn't come out." Her voice had the oddest quality to it, like distance was baked into it, like the words came from far away and reached me late. I wanted to ask more, but something about the way she stared into the dark made the cab feel tighter, warmer, like the air wasn't moving right. We reached a lonely stop sign at a crossroads, one of those signs that rattles when the wind blows, even though the wind wasn't blowing. I looked down just long enough to check the temp gauge. When I looked up, she was gone. Passenger seat empty. Door still closed tight. No dome light flickered. No shift of weight. No sound of movement. Just gone. My breath caught sharp. I hit the hazards, jumped out, and walked around the truck with a flashlight. No footprints. Not in the dirt. Not on the shoulder. Not on the step rail. The desert was untouched. The warmth inside the cab clung to me when I climbed back in. My hands trembled on the wheel. I didn't talk. Didn't turn the radio on. I just drove until the sun finally pushed itself above the ragged horizon. Gold-colored light washed over the road, and the tension in my shoulders finally loosened when I reached the ranger station near Beatty. The ranger on duty was older, face lined from sun, jaw rough with stubble. He took off his hat when I told him what happened. "What did she look like?" he asked quietly. I described her. He exhaled slow. "Damn. What?" He motioned for me to follow him inside. His boots thudded heavy on the wooden floor of the station. He pulled a binder from a steel cabinet, opened to a page marked with a red tab. A photograph. Same woman. Same denim jacket. Same tired eyes. "She died out there," he said. 1998. Search and rescue found her near the canyon entrance. Exposure. He tapped the photo gently. Her husband. We never found him. A chill ran through me that had nothing to do with the morning cold. He closed the binder. Since then, drivers occasionally report seeing her, standing near the canyon, waving them down. His eyes met mine. She's not looking for a ride. She's looking for someone to go back into that canyon with her. I didn't say anything. Couldn't. The ranger walked me back outside. The desert looked harmless in daylight, soft, gold, open, but I knew better now. Something was still waiting out there in the cold blue hours before dawn. Something that never came out of the canyon. And something or someone still looking for him. I drove away from the station slowly, eyes drifting once to the empty passenger seat. A faint impression in the fabric caught the sunlight just right, almost like a shape had been resting there. It faded as soon as I blinked. But the cold stayed in the cab much longer. I don't take that route before sunrise anymore. Not near Devil's Throat. Not near those dead blue miles where the world feels thin. Because I know now, some passengers don't stay gone. Some still need someone to follow them back into the dark. I've been driving long enough to know where you can safely shut your eyes for 20 minutes and where you should just push through. Some stretches feel watched, even when there's not another soul for 50 miles. That overpass on Highway 50 should have been one of the safe places. Should have. It was just past 2:30 in the morning. Late fall. A cold that didn't show in the mirrors but crawled into the gaps around the windows. I was running eastbound on 50, the loneliest road, hauling a half-loaded dry van, pallet paper goods, strapped tight. Truck was a worn but reliable 2015 Cascadia. Dash lit soft orange, steering wheel slick where the leather was worn smooth. The usual faint smell of coffee, sweat, and Armor All. My logbook said I had time, but my eyes said otherwise. You know that point where the road lines stop being lines and start turning into long white ropes that want to pull you under? I'd hit it miles back. I'd already rolled down the window twice, slapped my own cheek once, drained the last of a gas station coffee that tasted like burnt cardboard. So when I saw the overpass, I made the call. It was one of those old concrete bridges that looked like they fell out of the 70s and no one bothered to fix them. Two thick pillars on each side, cracked shoulders, sand pushed up where the plows never quite reach. No traffic above, no exits, just the highway stretching over itself like a tired arm. I eased off the throttle, put on my right signal out of habit, no one to see it but me, and guided the rig down onto the gravel patch under the bridge. The crunch of rock under the tires echoed up into the concrete, a hollow, drum-like sound. I set the brake. Air hissed out in a sigh that matched my own. Out there, under the overpass, the wind was dead. No whistle through the beams. No rustle in the scrub. Just the tick-tick-tick of a hot engine settling and the faint, distant hum of nothing. I killed my headlights but left the marker lights on. Cab dimmed to that soft glow you can fall asleep in. I checked the mirrors, front, sides. then the grainy rear camera feed mounted on the dash. Just black and the pale suggestion of my own trailer. 20 minutes? I muttered. More to keep my brain engaged than anything. Just a quick reset. I slid my seat back, reclined it a little, kept the seatbelt looped loosely across my lap. Shoes stayed on. Habit. You never know when you'll have to move fast. The hum of the highway above was weaker than I expected. One car passed in the first 5 minutes. Maybe. Sounded far away. The silence under the bridge settled like dust. I closed my eyes. I don't know how long I was actually out. It wasn't 20 minutes. It wasn't long enough to hit REM. Just that gray space where your thoughts get watery and the line between dream and real starts to blur. The first tap woke me. Soft, almost polite. A light tick against the underside of the cab floor, right under my feet. At first, I thought I'd imagined it. Then it came again. Same spot, same strength. Tick. I opened my eyes, staring at the dark windshield, half expecting to see a face pressed against the glass. Nothing. Just a faint reflection of my own eyes and the curve of the steering wheel. Tap tap. Slightly harder this time. It didn't sound like a rock tossed up from the road or an engine knocking. It sounded intentional, like someone standing under the cab, reaching up, testing where the floor was. I shifted upright, seat creaking. The temperature in the cab felt a shade colder, but that could have been my imagination or the heater cycling down. Probably a raccoon, I told myself. Maybe a dog. The idea of some animal chewing on my airlines or wiring annoyed me more than anything. I grabbed my flashlight from the door pocket, heavy, metal, good for more than just lighting, and shoved the door open. The night under the overpass felt thick. My boots hit the ground with a dull thud. Gravel crunched. The air tasted dry, dusty, with that faint concrete smell you get in old parking structures. Above me, the underside of the bridge loomed in flat, shadowy slabs. I clicked on the flashlight. The beam cut a white path under the belly of my truck, through dust and hanging brake lines. "Hey!" I called, as if whatever was down there spoke English. Out from under there. No movement. No eyes flashing back at me. I walked slowly along the driver's side, beam scanning the support pillars, the open sand, the trailer axles. The highway above stayed quiet. No rumble of a passing car. Just me, my own breathing, and the distant ticking of cooling metal. Halfway down the trailer, I stopped. The dust on the ground next to the wheels had been disturbed. Not footprints, not paw prints. More like something big had slid along on its belly or its back, leaving a long, smeared track that started under the middle of the trailer and ended nowhere. I swung the beam deeper under the trailer. Nothing. No animal. No drag marks continuing. The track just started smeared, then stopped like whatever made it had lifted straight up. I told myself it was my own brakes venting earlier, hot air blowing dust. Made sense. Sort of. Enough to stop my heart from hammering out of my chest. I kept walking toward the rear. That's when I saw the shadow. It came from the far pillar on the passenger side, past the trailer. Just the edge of it at first. A long vertical smear that didn't match the angle of any beam, any light source. It moved. It darted across the sand between the pillars in a blur, too tall and too fast. Not running on legs, stretched, like it was hinged wrong, like a piece of darkness being pulled by an unseen hand. My flashlight beam jerked after it and hit bare concrete. No figure, no animal bolting away, just empty sand and the same old graffiti on the pillars. The hair on my arms lifted. Under my trailer, metal squealed. Long, slow scraping, coming from the cross members. Not a short scrape like a rock. A sustained, drawn-out drag, as if something with long nails was pulling itself along the underside of the trailer, hooking to the steel. Every instinct in me shouted the same thing at the same time. Stop looking. Get back in the truck. I backed toward the cab door, beam still roaming under the chassis. Just before I stepped up, the scrape moved. Faster now. From the rear axles toward the cab right under my feet. Something heavy shifted against the metal. The whole trailer bounced once, subtle but undeniable. That did it. I yanked the door open, climbed back into the cab, and slammed it shut hard enough to rattle the glass. Locked the doors. Not that a lock would mean much against something that could crawl along steel, but you hold on to the rituals you have. The air in the cab felt different now. Thinner. The warmth from the vents didn't seem to stick. My breath came out a little visible, just a faint blur in the beam of my dashboard light. Under the floor, directly below the pedals, something tapped again. Heavier. I turned the key. The engine rolled over, coughed, then came alive. The familiar vibration under my seat should have comforted me. Didn't. It just meant that whatever was touching the underside of my cab could feel it too. I dropped the parking brake. Air released with a loud hiss that echoed under the bridge. As I eased onto the throttle, there was a final scraping. A fast, desperate drag along the length of the trailer's frame, like whatever was under there was trying to find purchase, to hold on. Then I was moving. Gravel spat from my tires. The bridge pillars slid past in my peripheral vision. I climbed the slight incline back onto the highway, headlights driving a clean line into the dark. For the next mile, the truck felt wrong. The steering wasn't loose, not exactly, but weight shifted in ways it shouldn't. A subtle extra pull on the trailer. A sensation like something heavy was hanging below the floor, changing the way the rig rode the broken asphalt. I glanced at my mirrors. Nothing out of place. Marker lights glowed red across the sides of the trailer. The rear camera feed showed the empty road behind. 2 bright dots where my taillights burned, and a whole lot of black. But every few seconds, that feed glitched. The image would stretch, smear horizontally, then snap back. Not enough to lose detail completely, just enough to make the trailer look longer, distorted like it was dragging a shadow of itself. I pushed the truck harder. 55, 60, 65. The engine hummed steady, but the sensation of extra weight didn't go away. If anything, it grew, like something was learning how to move with the sway of the trailer, climbing closer toward the front. There was a moment, short, probably less than a second, where I could feel something directly under my seat. Not touching, not hitting, just there, like a big magnet on the other side of the floor, pulling at my bones. The radio clicked, even though I hadn't turned it on. A burst of static hissed through the speakers and died. "Come on," I muttered through clenched teeth. "Come on." 10, 15 miles slipped under the wheels like nothing. The old overpass was well behind me now. The highway opened out into a long, straight stretch where the sky finally started to lighten by a shade, black softening to deep navy. Then, as suddenly as it started, the feeling lifted. The truck's weight normalized. The steering eased back into the usual play. The cab warmed up properly, no lingering chill. The rear camera stopped glitching. I didn't stop until first light, when I reached a wide pullout near a small cluster of buildings. A diner, a closed gas station, a dusty parking lot that had seen better days. I backed into a spot, set the brake, and just sat there for a minute, staring at the camera feed. Just empty road now. Just the rectangle of my trailer, faintly visible in the outline. I should have let it go. I didn't. Curiosity, or maybe the need to prove to myself I wasn't losing my mind, made me pull the SD card from the camera unit. I plugged it into my laptop on the dash. Fast-forwarded to roughly the time between the overpass and those first few miles after. Frame after frame of grainy night highway flickered past. Then I saw it. For about 12 seconds of footage, something was under the trailer. Not in full view, just a stretched silhouette, clinging to the bottom of the frame rails. It was longer than a man, joints bent at angles that didn't look right for anything with bones. As the truck rolled, its shape shifted with the movement. Limbs extended toward the rear axles like it was dragging itself along, keeping pace with my speed. The edges of it looked wrong, blurred, like the camera couldn't focus on it, like the world around it was a different resolution. Then, near the edge of my headlights' reach, right as the highway straightened out, the shadow let go. One frame, it was there. The next, it was falling away, drifting backward along the asphalt, stretched out, then thinning into nothing before it even hit the pavement. I paused the video, backed it up, watched it again. Every time, the same. It never hit the ground. It just unraveled. I sat there in the stopped truck with the laptop screen glowing faintly in the cab and realized my hands were shaking. I still run Highway 50. Freight doesn't care about your nerves. But I don't park under that overpass anymore. I don't nap under bridges if I can help it. Because sometimes the dark under there isn't empty. Sometimes something is already using that shade as a ceiling. Waiting for a warm engine and a still cab floor. Waiting for a driver who thinks 20 minutes of sleep is worth whatever else might be sharing the underside of his truck. I've driven through some lonely places in Nevada, but Warm Springs Junction is in a league of its own. Just a three-way fork of highway, a boarded motel, a rusted pump station, and an abandoned diner that still has its neon letters clinging to the facade like rotten teeth. Most nights it's quiet, but not dead. A single porch light here, a bathroom light there, and the moon doing most of the heavy lifting. But that night, the world looked erased. Pitch black. Not night black. Not storm black. Absence. I was hauling a half-loaded reefer up toward Austin. Steady run. Nothing unusual in the paperwork. My thermometer read 19 degrees Fahrenheit. The tan lines across the sky told me clouds might have been there, but I couldn't see them. No stars. No moon. Just a ceiling of pure, solid darkness pressing down. Around 1:15 a.m., I reached the junction. My eyes were burning from the long straightaways, so I decided to pull off near the basin. Nothing fancy, just enough room for a rig to breathe. The second I dipped off the highway, my headlights hit nothing. I mean that literally. They stretched forward maybe 5 feet, then got swallowed. Like the darkness wasn't just there. It was thick, dense, absorbing light like ink soaking into cloth. I muttered, "What the hell?" and eased to a stop. The cab felt warmer than usual. Stale heater air, smell of old coffee in the thermos holder, faint notes of coolant from a leak I'd been ignoring. My dashboard glowed soft green, looking out of place against the void pressing against the windows. I cracked the door, stepped down onto the gravel, boots crunching softly. The sound died instantly. Not faded, died. Like the world outside the immediate circle around my truck was somehow soundproofed. My breath fogged in front of me, but even the fog didn't drift. It just hovered, suspended. I aimed my flashlight forward. The beam went maybe 2 feet, then dissolved. No dust particles, no reflections, just a wall of black waiting to swallow anything that crossed the threshold. I tried scanning my tires anyway, habit. I walked alongside the trailer, tapping the rubber, checking the sidewalls. Everything was normal, but the silence, it wasn't the desert kind of silence. It was a sealed room silence, coffin silence. The air felt wrong too, dry but heavy, like static pressure building before a storm. Except there was no wind, not a whisper. The air didn't move. I was near the rear axles when I heard the first footstep. A slow, heavy one. Behind me, then another. Closer. The sound didn't echo. It didn't bounce off the pavement. It just appeared, as if the noise itself wasn't tied to anything physical. I turned slowly, flashlight trembling slightly in my grip. Nothing but the small, shrinking bubble of visibility my headlights gave me, barely touching my own trailer. Another footstep, this time to my left. Closer still. My ribs tightened. Instinct said don't run, predator logic. But instinct also said get back inside the truck now. I backed toward the cab door, boots crunching again, but only my footsteps made sound. Whatever was moving around me didn't disturb the gravel. Didn't breathe. Didn't shift weight. It just circled. Deliberate. Slow. I reached for the handle, and the moment my hand grabbed cold metal, a deep exhale came from right behind me. Warm. Wet. Too close. I spun around, flashlight shaking in my hand, and nearly dropped it when the beam caught something moving just outside the edge of the light. Not a shape. Not a silhouette. A shift. Like a curtain of blackness pulling slightly inward. Rippling. I bolted up into the cab, slammed the door, hit the lock so hard my palms stung. The cab lights flickered once, weakly, like they were fighting to stay alive. Inside, the air felt thick. The heater hummed a steady low drone, but underneath it, I heard breathing, not human breathing, something deeper, rougher, like air being dragged through a long, wet tunnel. I grabbed the key, turned the engine over. The dash lit fully, vibrating the cab back to life. The headlights flared brighter, and for a split second they lit something right outside my driver's side window. A shape, tall enough that its upper half wasn't even visible in the frame. All I saw was an arm sliding across the glass. A hand, long fingers, longer than any human fingers. Thin, jointed wrong, like extra segments where there shouldn't be. They pressed against the window, palm first. A smear appeared, oily, dark, almost iridescent. The glass vibrated under the pressure. Another hand slapped onto the passenger side, hard enough to rattle the door in its frame. Then another, and another. Soon the whole cab sounded like rain hitting a tin roof, except every drop was a hand. Long fingers dragging, scraping, probing. I tried shifting into drive, but the rig didn't move. The darkness beyond my headlights didn't allow the light to reach far enough to show the shoulder. It felt like driving into a tunnel with no end. The breathing outside grew heavier, several sources now, surrounding the cab, pressing close. Then everything changed at once. A burst of light, brilliant, white, sudden, lit up the entire junction like a flare going off in a cave. Street lights flickering back on. The motel's neon sign sputtering alive. The rusty pump lights humming. Even the stars flickered back into place overhead. And just like that, everything touching my truck vanished. No movement, no shadows, no breathing. Just an empty junction, still quiet but no longer dead. My pulse hammered in my ears. I sat there gripping the wheel, waiting for something, anything, to come out of hiding. Nothing did. Eventually, I put the truck in gear and rolled forward, letting the light bleed back into the cab like fresh air. I didn't stop until Fallon. Morning sun warmed the hood. My nerves had finally calmed enough for me to climb out and check the damage. I walked around the cab and froze. Every window, driver's side, passenger side, sleeper, had smeared prints. Oily, blackish, stretching almost 2 feet long. Each with finger marks that curved at impossible angles, as if the hand that made them could bend backward and forward the same way. When I wiped one with my glove, the smear didn't clean off fully. It just streaked thinner, leaving faint iridescent lines like dried snail trails. I told myself it might have been condensation mixing with something on the road. But deep down I knew there was something in that blackout that the light chased away, but didn't destroy. Something that moved without sound. Something that needed no moon or stars. Something that isn't gone, just waiting for darkness deep enough to call it back. And I haven't stopped at Warm Springs Junction since. I've been hauling freight through Nevada long enough to know the desert plays tricks on tired eyes. Heat shimmer, dust devils, shadows cast by nothing. You learn to ignore half of what you think you see. But what happened outside Beatty wasn't a trick. No shimmer, no mirage, no illusion caused by fatigue. It was something that wanted to be seen. This was about 4 years back. I was hauling a full trailer of copper wiring out of Kingman, heading north toward Reno. Copper is heavy, dense stuff, so the load was stable, the trailer pulled clean, the engine sweating under it but predictable. My truck then was a 2016 Peterbilt 579. Dark blue, cab smelled like burnt coffee, old upholstery, and a hint of rubber from the wiring coils in the back. My steering wheel had that worn patch at the top, smooth from years of my palm running over it. Night driving had never bothered me, but that night the desert felt emptier than usual. No wind, no distant headlights, just the hum of my tires kissing the asphalt and the faint vibration under my seat. Around 12:45 a.m., I passed the faded sign welcoming drivers to the outskirts of Beatty. Temperature on the dash read 46 degrees Fahrenheit, dropping slow. The sky was clear, stars sharp and bright like cold needles against black velvet. I glanced at the rear camera monitor out of habit. Clear road behind me, clear sky, just the faint red glow of my taillights stretching across miles of nothing. I blinked, and suddenly, she was there, a little girl, barefoot, Dust caked on her legs up to her knees. Hair long, tangled, hanging over half her face. Standing dead center in the lane behind my trailer. Staring straight into the camera lens. My foot hit the brake instinctively, harder than I meant to. The trailer wobbled slightly under the sudden deceleration, then steadied as I eased the wheel. Heart pounding, I threw a glance at the mirror, expecting to see her tiny shape illuminated by my taillights. Nothing, just open desert highway. I put the truck in park, hazard strobing red across the dirt. Climbed out, boots hitting the asphalt with a sharp crack that echoed through the silence. I walked the length of the trailer, flashlight cutting long white lines across the gravel. Empty. No footprints. No movement. No girl. I told myself it was fatigue. I hadn't slept well the night before. Maybe I'd imagined her. Maybe the camera glitched. Maybe, when I climbed back in, the rear monitor showed the last recorded frame. Timestamp, 12:46 and 3 seconds AM, trailer weight reading, 41,327 pounds. Baseline had been 41,314 all night, exactly 13 pounds heavier. I stared at that number so long my eyes watered. I kept rolling slow at first, hands tight on the wheel, CB silent except for a soft hiss. I flipped to channel 19, hoping for chatter. Nothing. The desert was a giant, breathless void. About 20 minutes later, with the road stretching straight as a ruler into blackness, I glanced at the rear monitor again. There she was, closer this time, head tilted slightly, hair covering both eyes now, like static had blurred her features. Trailer weight, 41,327 pounds. My throat went dry. I eased off the throttle. She didn't move, didn't sway, didn't blink, just stared into the lens like she was watching me, not the road. A mile passed, 2, 3. Every time the road dipped or rose slightly, she remained perfectly centered in the frame. Never farther, never nearer, as if the camera wasn't showing distance at all but intention. Then, right as the dashed lane markings flickered under my trailer, she vanished. The weight dropped, 41,314 pounds. The same second it disappeared, the suspension hummed lighter. You can feel 13 pounds in a trailer if you've been trucking long enough. Copper is dense, you learn its rhythm. Something had been extra weight on those axles. Something had climbed off. I should have found a place to stop then. Should have radioed someone. Should have done anything besides keep rolling north with a ghost hitchhiker phasing in and out of my camera feed. But truckers live in a weird headspace sometimes. We rationalize the bizarre until it becomes manageable. She's not real. It's a wiring glitch. Just keep driving. And then the third time happened. 1:39 a.m. Highway straight as a laser. No turns in sight. I'd gotten used to checking the mirror every few minutes. Not for her exactly, but for anything. My eyes drifted to the camera. There she was again. But this time she was closer. So close her face filled half the frame. The camera's fisheye warping her features, stretching her mouth just enough to make it look wrong. Her eyes, what little I could see past her tangled hair, looked hollow. Not dark, empty. Trailer weight, 41,327 pounds. I didn't brake this time, didn't swerve, didn't look away. Okay, I whispered to myself. Okay. The steering wheel vibrated gently under my hands, steady and calm despite the panic poisoning my bloodstream. A soft tapping came from the back of the cab, light at first, like someone brushing a fingernail against aluminum. Tick, 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 tick. Then it stopped. The rear camera flickered. She was gone. Weight, 41,314 pounds. The tapping sound traveled from the back of the sleeper to the side panel, to the floor under my boots, like tiny feet moving along the frame of the truck. I gripped the wheel so hard my knuckles whitened. Stay outside, I whispered. Stay outside. The tapping stopped beneath the cab floor. Silence. Then, thump. Something hit the underside of the cab directly under my seat. Hard, like a fist or a small body. I swore, stomped the accelerator, and the truck lunged forward, engine roaring, gravel spraying behind me as if the desert itself were chasing me. The tapping didn't return. The weight didn't change. The camera stayed clear. For now. I didn't stop until Tonopah, pulled into a truck stop next to a line of semis, the warm safety of parallel diesel engines humming through the night. Inside the cab, with the engine idling and the world finally feeling normal, I had enough nerves to review the camera footage. I scrubbed backward to the first moment she appeared. Clear frame, empty road, then pop. She didn't walk into frame, didn't fade in gradually. One frame she wasn't there. Next frame she was. No transition frames. At 12 hours 46 minutes and 3 seconds, the trailer weight jumped. Exactly 13 pounds, at the same millisecond. I reviewed the second appearance. Same pattern. One frame empty. Next frame her. Weight increased. Exactly 13. Third appearance, her face nearly pressed to the lens, same thing. Appeared instantly, disappeared instantly. Weight synced with both. I checked the audio feed. The tapping beneath the cab registered faintly, but under it something else. A soft breath. Small, childlike, close to the microphone. I closed the laptop quickly, pulse hammering. I slept in the cab that night with all the lights on. In the morning, before I rolled out, I did a walk around. Checked the tires. Checked the glad hands. Checked the rear doors. On the back of the trailer, right near the handle, was a small footprint. Bare, dusty. Toe prints long and distinct. Maybe 10 years old. Maybe younger. But no child had been near my truck. And the footprint wasn't made in dirt. It was made in copper dust. From inside the sealed trailer. I delivered the load, signed the papers, and didn't breathe a word. But I still check my rear camera more than most drivers. Because sometimes, usually past midnight on empty roads, I feel the trailer shift. Just 13 pounds. No more. No less. Enough to let me know she's climbed back on. I've driven the Extraterrestrial Highway more times than I can count. Highway 375 is quiet on the best of nights, unsettling on the worst. But it's predictable, long straights, low dunes, and silence so thick you start hearing your own pulse in your ears. That night was different from the moment I rolled into that stretch. It was just past 1 a.m., winter cold, sky so clear the stars looked close enough to scrape the top of my trailer. I was hauling electronics, light load for once. In a 2020 Cascadia I'd been assigned temporarily. Everything in that cab smelled new. Fresh upholstery, unburnt plastic, and the faint chemical odor from the dash cleaner the last guy used. My tires hummed steady on the asphalt, that familiar long-haul vibration slipping up through my boots and into my spine. The CB sat on channel 19, murmuring low static. No chatter, no drivers, not even the usual late-night nonsense. Just me. Open road. Silent desert. About 10 miles past Rachel, my headlights touched something that shouldn't have been there. Convoy. I first saw the glow, dull red from taillights far ahead, barely visible through the frost-bitten desert air. I eased off the throttle, thinking it was some military transport. Wouldn't be the first time. The closer I got, the clearer the shapes became. Old military-style trucks. Desert tan. Canvas-covered backs. No rear plates. Windows fogged from the inside. 6 trucks, perfectly spaced. Perfectly aligned. Perfectly silent. Even at a distance, I felt something strange. No dust kicked up behind them. Their tires touched the road, but they didn't disturb a single grain of desert grit. My headlights reached the back one. The paint was wrong. Sun-faded but clean, like it hadn't seen a day of weather in decades. The canvas cover didn't flap, didn't shift, didn't move at all. Just hung rigid like it was carved there. My CB crackled. I grabbed the mic. Convoy ahead. This is westbound south of Rachel. Any of you monitoring? Static. I adjusted the frequency, trying direct contact with the lead. Nothing. That's when I noticed my engine sound had changed. A slight drag, a faint strain, like the air got thicker the closer I came to them. The trucks maintained exactly 42 miles per hour. Not 41. Not 43. The needle stayed perfectly centered, Not a wobble, not a shift. I tried passing. Signaled. East left. That's when the engine stalled. Not coughed. Not sputtered. Just died. My dash lights dimmed. Headlights dropped to half beam. Cruise control kicked off with a soft click. My truck rolled to 30 miles per hour, 25. The convoy pulling away slowly, like they were dragging the life out of my rig with them. I threw it into neutral and tried to restart. The starter clicked. Then again. Dead. My mirrors caught the rearmost military truck creeping farther away into the night. I cursed, hit the ignition one more time. The engine roared back to life, so suddenly the cab shook. I slammed it into gear, accelerated, and caught back up. I stayed several truck lengths behind them this time, careful not to get too close. I watched their taillights through the frost on my windshield, red dots floating through the dark like eyes. I radioed again. Convoy ahead. Identify yourselves. Anyone have ears on? Silence. Then, without warning, every truck in the convoy flashed its brake lights. Once. Perfect synchronization. So exact it looked mechanical. I braked too, more out of instinct than choice. My hazard lights flicked orange across the empty desert. The trucks slowed slightly. Not full stop. Just enough to send a message. My heart was hammering now. Cold sweat gathered behind my neck, trickling under the collar of my jacket. What the hell are you? I whispered to no one. The red lights glowed brighter as the convoy braked again. One uniform pulse. Then every truck turned. Not drifted. Not merged. Not found an exit. They pivoted off the highway, all at the same instant, wheels angled right in perfect unison. I blinked hard, leaning forward in the cab. There was no road there, just a rise of desert sand leading into nothing. But the convoy rolled off the asphalt smoothly, gliding over the dunes like the desert had become paved beneath them. I watched their taillights bob slightly with the terrain, then dip down behind a tall dune and vanish completely. Gone. No dust cloud. No engine noise. No glow. Just empty desert again. I sat there for a long second, breathing hard, my headlights washing the dune in pale yellow. Finally, I eased forward, pulling the rig to the shoulder opposite where they disappeared. The sand was undisturbed, smooth, untouched. Nothing had rolled across it in years. I didn't sleep, didn't eat, didn't even radio anyone after that. I kept driving until I found a turnout miles ahead, parked between two parked semis, and waited for daylight. When the sun rose, burning orange across the desert, I climbed down and walked back toward the dunes. My boots left prints. Everything else was smooth. No tire tracks, no footprints, no depressions, like nothing had passed at all. I checked the exact dune the convoy had vanished behind the night before. Smooth, untouched, not a single sign of rubber or weight. My hands shook as I walked back. The sand told the truth. Nothing had driven there. Back at the truck stop, I reviewed my dashcam. Frame by frame, pixel by pixel. At 1 hour 13 minutes and 24 seconds, the road ahead was empty. At 1 hour 13 minutes and 25 seconds, the entire convoy was there. 6 trucks, perfectly aligned, perfectly spaced, perfectly still, appearing in a single frame, then disappearing from a single frame later when they turned. No blur, no fade, no transitional movement, just there, then not. One frame even froze for a fraction too long, something I'd never seen my dashcam do. In that frozen frame, the lead truck's windshield appeared clearer, the fog thinning slightly. Behind that glass, I swear I saw a face. Not human, not exactly, eyes too far apart, cheekbones too narrow, skin the color of desert clay, and staring straight into the camera. People talk about phantom lights, strange aircraft, missing time on that highway. I've seen none of that, but I saw a convoy that wasn't bound by the rules of the road, or physics or time. A convoy that didn't move through the desert moved for them. Now, every time I drive Highway 375 at night, I watch the mirrors more than the road. Because sometimes, when the stars are sharp and the night is cold, I catch the faintest flicker of red taillights in the distance, perfectly spaced, perfectly synchronized, and waiting for me to get closer. I've run Sand Ridge Cutoff more times than I can remember. It's one of those stretches truckers either love or avoid. Tight turns, steep rock walls on one side, open drop-offs on the other. A shortcut between two long desert corridors. Saves you a good 20 minutes if you know how to take it. The wind is the worst part. It funnels through the rock in long, jagged howls that sound almost human. Drivers joke about it. I used to joke too. I don't anymore. This happened 2 winters ago. January. I was in my old 2014 Freightliner Cascadia. White cab, fading decals, dash lights that glowed soft amber at night. I'd cleaned it earlier that week, so the inside smelled like a mix of pine sol, old coffee, and dusty heating vents. It was around 2:30 a.m., cold enough to sting my nose with every breath. The sky was clear, stars sharp, moon low but bright. My headlights cut a narrow tunnel through the dark, catching bits of desert brush and the jagged outline of the rocks lining the road. I had a half-loaded dry van, appliances strapped tight. Good weight distribution. The trailer held steady despite the occasional gust gripping the side. The CB was quiet. I kept the volume low, just enough to catch emergency chatter if it came up. All I heard was soft static, like a distant whispering through cotton. Sand Ridge Cutoff started at the bottom of a shallow basin. By the time you're 2 miles in, the rock walls begin to rise. The air changes. You can feel it thicken, less open space, more pressure, like the wind is being jammed through invisible cracks. At 2:34 a.m., I heard the first scream. Not wind, not even close. It was faint at first, high-pitched, human, sharp. The kind of scream someone makes when they're seeing their death approach. My hands tightened on the wheel. I eased off the accelerator, listening. The scream didn't repeat. The wind blew hard across the rocks, carrying a long moaning sound that blended into the darkness. Wind tunnel, I told myself. Nothing else. I've heard tricks like that on mountain passes. The desert can copy human sounds better than you'd think. But 2 minutes later, it came again. This time deeper, longer, drawn out like someone's throat was being stretched while the sound was forced out. My mirrors rattled from the vibration. My entire cab buzzed like a tuning fork. The scream rolled through the cutoff like a low-frequency shockwave, bouncing between the rock walls. It wasn't just loud. It pushed against me. Pressure building in my ears, in my ribs, in my teeth. I slowed to 25, hazard lights clicking softly in the cab. Anyone on Sand Ridge tonight? I radioed. Static. The road curved left into a narrow stretch flanked by steep walls. That's when my headlights caught motion just ahead. A figure. On the ground. Crawling from the left shoulder toward the right lane. My heart spiked. I slammed the brake and jerked the wheel to avoid hitting whoever it was. The trailer rocked, load straps straining against the sudden shift. The figure moved wrong. Jerky, uneven, limbs pulling at angles that didn't make sense, like bones bending in places bones shouldn't bend. Its head hung down, hair hanging in a filthy curtain. One arm dragged behind as if it was broken in more than one place. I stopped about 10 feet short. Hazards ticked. Engine idled. My breath fogged the inside of the cab. The figure froze, like it knew I'd stopped. Then, it dropped flat against the asphalt. I killed the engine without thinking. The sudden silence felt suffocating. I grabbed my flashlight, opened the door, boots hitting the pavement with a dull thud. The rock walls made the air feel tighter here. Every sound bounced back too quickly. "Hey, you okay?" I shouted. My voice sounded small. I jogged forward, flashlight beam bouncing across the asphalt until it hit the spot where the figure had collapsed. Nothing. Clean road. No footprints. No drag marks. No disturbed gravel. It was as if the person I'd seen crawling across the highway had never existed. I swung the light across the shoulders, the brush, the rocky incline. The desert was dead silent except for the distant sigh of wind scraping over the ridge above. What the hell? Then, the scream erupted again. Right behind me, not 20 yards away, not on the rocks, directly behind me on the asphalt. It hit like a physical blast. My bones vibrated. My breath caught mid-exhale. The flashlight slipped from my hand and clattered on the road, beam spinning wildly. I turned slowly. Nothing there. Just empty highway. But I could feel something. A pressure like hot air pushing against my back. 5 seconds passed. Then something rushed past me. Not footsteps. Not wind. Movement. Fast. Huge. A violent burst of cold air slammed against my legs, wrapped around my torso, and tore itself forward into the dark, as if a massive body had shot past without touching me. The air displaced so hard it felt like someone had punched the atmosphere itself. My ears popped, my eyes watered, and through the blast, I heard it, a growl, deep, hollow, like a massive chest cavity forcing out a sound far too large for lungs. It faded as whatever it was rushed down the cutoff ahead of me, swallowed by darkness. I backed toward my truck, heart hammering, flashlight still spinning on the ground. As I reached the cab, another scream erupted, this time from high above, from the rock ridge itself. The sound rolled down the walls, hit the truck, rattled the mirrors, and bounced off the trailer. I scrambled inside, slammed the door, and locked it instinctively. My hands were shaking so badly the keys jingled. I fired the engine back up and floored it, hazards still blinking in rapid, panicked flashes. The scream followed me, not as loud now, but drawn out, stretched, like whatever was up there was pacing me along the ridge, watching my rig struggle through its territory. 10 minutes later, the walls dropped back into open desert. The air loosened. The sound stopped, just like someone flicked a switch. I drove another 30 miles before my pulse calmed enough for me to breathe normally. At dawn, I checked the trailer. The entire right side was coated in a thin layer of frost. Not moisture frost, but a powdery white film like cold dust. The kind you see on metal that's been left in a freezer. My mirrors still rattled slightly even after the engine was off. I haven't stopped on that cutoff since. And every driver I've talked to who's run that stretch alone at night, they've heard things. Screams that aren't wind. Rumbles that follow the truck but never touch it. Shocks of cold air that come from nowhere. Whatever lives in that carved-out canyon isn't human. It never was. And it doesn't want company. It just wants to be heard. And once you've heard it, you never forget the sound. I've been running Nevada long enough to know when the desert is just being weird. And when something is wrong. This was wrong. My name's Cole. I've been driving long haul going on 20 years. Mostly Southwest lanes, Vegas to Salt Lake, Reno runs, a lot of nights on 93 and 375. You learn the personality of those roads. Rachel, Nevada, the little town on the edge of nowhere just off Highway 375, has its share of stories. I always treated them like campfire fuel. This one didn't feel like a story. Felt like a warning I was stupid enough to ignore. It was a little after midnight, early spring, temperature hovering just above freezing. Clear sky, no wind, stars so sharp they looked like holes punched straight through the dark. I was hauling electronics, pallets of boxed monitors and parts, out of Vegas, heading north toward Ely. Truck was a 2018 Kenworth T680. Nothing fancy, but she rode smooth. The cab smelled like stale coffee, vinyl, and the faint chemical tang of windshield washer fluid. I had the heater set low, a cool draft leaking around the window seals just enough to keep me awake. Highway 375, the Extraterrestrial Highway, was nearly empty. No oncoming traffic for miles. Just my headlights carving a tunnel through the dark. White lines ticking past with metronome regularity. CB on channel 19. Nothing but soft static and an occasional crackle, like someone trying to speak from too far away. I passed the Rachel 10 miles sign and took a swallow of lukewarm coffee. That's when I noticed the movement off to my right. At first, it was just a shape in the dark. The edges where the desert floor met the starlit sky shifted slightly. I've seen my share of odd illusions. Cows, boulders, bushes that look human when you're tired. But this wasn't on the side of the road. This was out in the open desert. Far from the highway, steadily moving. I leaned forward, hand on the top of the wheel, eyes narrowing. Headlights weren't reaching him yet, but the moonlight was enough to outline a figure. Tall, thin, wearing what looked like dark clothes. His legs moved in a steady rhythm as he approached the road. No flashlight, no reflective gear, no vehicle nearby, just a lone man walking across the empty desert at night. People do strange things, sure. But in that cold, with that distance from town, with nothing in his hands, every instinct in me went on alert. Still, I didn't feel fear yet. Just that uneasy curiosity drivers get when something doesn't fit the pattern. As I got closer, I realized what was wrong. His gait. From a distance, it looked like a normal walk, arms swinging, legs moving in time. But the closer I came, the more it looked off. Too stiff, too precise. Like someone had studied walking and then tried to copy it without understanding how balance works. 45 miles an hour now. I eased off the throttle just enough to give myself time to watch, not enough to be obvious. The figure kept moving toward the highway. Then my headlights finally washed over him, and my stomach dropped. He wasn't walking forward. He was walking backwards, perfectly straight, heels striking first, toes lifting, arms swinging in the wrong rhythm, like a tape being rewound. His spine stayed rigid, shoulders squared toward the black horizon behind him. But his feet carried him toward the highway, toward me. Every step was dead straight. No wobble. No looking over his shoulder. Just that backwards march, like he was being dragged by invisible strings toward the road. Jesus? I muttered under my breath, fingers tightening on the wheel. The CB crackled once. A burst of static loud enough to make me flinch. Breaker 19, I said, picking up the mic. Anybody near Rachel seeing a pedestrian out in the desert? Guys walking weird. Silence. Just the soft hiss again. I was a few hundred yards out when he reached the shoulder. He never turned. Not once. His heels touched gravel. Then asphalt. Then he stopped, perfectly still, right at the edge of my lane. Back to me. Head down. Arms hanging at his sides. My foot hovered over the brake. Logic said, slow down. Give him wide berth, keep rolling. Something deeper, older said, don't stop. I edged left, guiding my rig near the center line, eyes locked on his unmoving shape. His clothes were dark, but not military or reflective. Just nondescript, the kind of outfit you'd forget 2 seconds after seeing it. As I came up on him, he moved. Not his feet, his head. It snapped backward at an angle no neck should allow. Sharp, sudden, like someone had yanked his face toward the sky with an invisible hook. I saw his profile then. Too pale in my headlights, jaw slack, eyes not blinking. And then his head kept going. Further, further, until his face was tilted almost straight up toward me, mouth hanging open, eyes rolled just enough that they caught the glow of my headlights. He was staring at me, upside down, back still facing forward, body perfectly still. My chest tightened. Every hair on my arms stood up under my jacket. The Kenworth shuddered. My engine sputtered, a brief cough. The RPMs dropped. The dash lights dimmed like someone had slowly put a hand over the sun. For a split second, the cab went almost dark. Only the faint green glow of the speedometer and the cold white of the headlight indicator remained. The man's upside-down face didn't change. Then, still not turning his body, he raised one arm. Slowly, smoothly, like a marionette being pulled by a precise, practiced hand. His hand lifted, elbow locked, until his arm was fully extended. Still facing away, head bent back, and he pointed straight at my truck. At me. Something in my brain slipped sideways. I didn't think. I reacted. I floored it. The rig lurched forward, engine roaring as fuel flooded the system. The dash lights flared back to full brightness, as if whatever had been suffocating them let go. I shot past him, eyes forward now, fingers crushing the wheel. Gravel spat under my right tires as I corrected back into my lane. Every muscle in my body screamed not to look in the mirrors. I looked anyway. He was still there, a shrinking figure in my side mirror, body facing away, head pinned back at that impossible angle, arms still fully extended, fingers still pointing at my truck. And as I watched, he started moving again, walking backward, perfectly straight, perfectly in line, heel to toe, like a tape rewinding into the desert. His head never turned. His arm never dropped. He just kept pointing. Step by step, he receded into the darkness, vanishing not like someone swallowed by distance, but like a marionette being pulled off stage, into a place just beyond my headlights' reach. I drove. For 2 hours, I barely blinked. The CB stayed dead. No trucks passed me. No oncoming headlights. Just that stretch of road unraveling in front of me, and the memory of that backward walk pinned to the inside of my skull. It wasn't until my fuel gauge nudged me that I realized how badly I needed to stop. There's a small gas station 2 hours north of Rachel that I like. Old pumps, hard coffee, decent parking for a few rigs. I pulled in under the buzzing canopy lights, killed my engine, and sat there for a full minute before my hands stopped shaking enough to open the door. Cold air slapped my face as I stepped onto the concrete. The smell of fuel and dust grounded me a little. There were 2 other trucks parked in the far lot, lights off, drivers shut down for the night. I walked inside, used the restroom, poured myself a fresh cup of bitter coffee just to have something hot to hold. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, comforting in their own ugly way. When I stepped back outside, the night felt normal again, until I saw the prints. They were on the shoulder, just past where my truck sat. Not on the concrete, on the gravel and packed dirt leading back to the highway. Footprints, not boot treads, bare feet. The toes were slightly splayed, heels narrow, like someone had walked through fine dust and then stepped there. But every print was backwards, heel in front, toes behind. The shape was unmistakable, the pressure pattern reversed, like someone had walked backward from the highway, right up to where my truck sat now. My skin went cold under my jacket. I followed the line of prints with my eyes. They went past my rig, stopped near the middle of the shoulder, then simply ended. No turning around, no fading, just stopped, as if the owner had been pulled straight up into the air. I didn't follow them. I didn't walk closer. I knew if I put my boot down inside one of those reverse prints, it would be like stepping into a handshake I didn't want to complete. I climbed back into the cab, locked the doors, and pulled my curtains halfway across. Not fully closed. I wanted to see out, but I didn't want to see everything. That night, sleep came in small, jittery waves. Every time I drifted, I jerked awake with the feeling someone was standing at the base of my cab steps, facing away from me, slowly lifting an arm. I still run that route, but near Rachel, I don't rubberneck the desert anymore. I don't investigate movement off the highway. I keep my eyes on the center line and my mirrors tilted just enough to see cars, not the things that walk where no one should walk. Because I've got this quiet, heavy feeling in my gut that whatever I saw that night wasn't coming toward the highway. It was being pulled back from somewhere it should have stayed. And the worst part? The way it pointed at my truck, like it recognized me, like next time it won't have to walk backward to find me. I've driven long stretches of Nevada night that feel like they want to swallow you whole. The kind of quiet where even your own breathing sounds too loud. But the stretch near Silver Peak around 1:30 to 2 a.m. has a way of making you feel watched. I'd taken that road dozens of times hauling equipment between Vegas, Beatty, and the smaller mining towns that survived on overpriced diesel and hope. That night, I was in my 2015 Freightliner Cascadia, silver cab, 53-foot dry van behind me. The cab smelled like stale coffee, window cleaner, and dust. The permanent scent of long-haul life. The air outside was still, not a hint of wind. Temperature dropping fast as the desert shifted from hot day to freezing night. The asphalt ahead reflected the moonlight like a sheet of brushed steel, my headlights cutting a narrow path through the emptiness. I remember looking at the dashboard clock. 1:39 a.m., right before I heard the singing. It started faint, a soft, drifting melody carried on the air. A woman's voice, clear enough that I thought I'd left the radio on one of those late-night folk stations truckers flip past without thinking. I reached out, checking the dial. Radio was off, but the singing continued. A single voice, wordless, slow, echoing, like lullaby notes pulled through a tunnel. My fingers tightened around the steering wheel. The hum of the tires under me stayed steady, but everything else felt wrong. Sound doesn't travel like that in the desert. There are no walls for it to bounce off. No trees. No anything. I rolled my window down halfway. The cold air slapped my face, and the singing grew louder. No distortion. No wind interference. Just a woman's voice, right beside my cab, like she was pacing me step for step in the darkness. My skin crawled. I leaned closer to the open window, scanning the rocks, the small dry shrubs, the endless sea of sand. Nothing. Only the melody. Smooth, haunting, unnervingly calm. "Anyone out there?" I called out the window, instantly regretting it. The singing didn't stop, didn't waver, didn't acknowledge me at all. The road curved slightly. My headlights swept across a large boulder on the right shoulder. That's when I saw her, a figure sitting atop the rock. Long hair drifting over her shoulders. White dress, old-fashioned. Thin fabric rippling even though there was no wind. Head bowed as she sang. My foot came off the accelerator. The rig coasted, engine rumbling low, heart hammering in my ears. I eased the truck closer to the shoulder, keeping the headlights on her. She didn't look up, didn't react. The melody slipped effortlessly from her, slow and hypnotic, like some ancient tune you weren't meant to understand. "Ma'am," I called out through the open window. "You okay? You need help." The singing continued. The desert around us fell completely silent. Not even the insects, if there were any left alive out there, made a sound. "Hey!" I shouted louder this time. That's when she moved. Not her arms, not her legs. Her head, slowly, too slowly, lifting upward as if invisible hands were pulling it from behind. When her face finally angled toward me, my breath stopped. There were no features, no eyes, no mouth, no nose, just smooth, clay-like skin stretched across a blank oval. A human shape missing everything that makes a human face. But the singing continued, growing louder, stronger, pouring out of her direction with no source to create it. My temperature dropped, not like a sea, like the cold came from inside my chest, like my lungs had frozen mid-breath. Frost crackled across the corner of the windshield again, veins of white creeping down like spiderwebs. I slammed my foot on the accelerator. The truck roared forward, tires spitting gravel as I swerved back onto the lane. The figure stayed perched on the boulder, head rising higher than any human neck should allow. Blank face pointed at me as I sped away. But the singing didn't fade. It followed, layered now, as if more voices had joined her, harmonizing. Soft, terrible chords weaving into the cab's metal frame. My windows vibrated. The steering wheel trembled. The side mirrors shivered so hard the glass buzzed. I turned the radio on static. Turned it off, still the singing. Closed the window, didn't help. Covered my ears, vibration still resonated through my skull. Felt like the melody wasn't outside the truck anymore. It was inside it. Inside me. Tonopah wasn't far, maybe 30 minutes. I pushed the truck harder than I should have. The speedometer creeping past numbers I typically avoided in the desert night. Every few seconds I checked my mirrors. First, nothing. Then faint handprints began to appear, pressed into the dust layer on my trailer. One, then another, then dozens. Small hands, large hands, long-fingered hands, short ones, all pressed upward as if climbing the back of the trailer. I stared, horrified, trying to make sense of it. The prints weren't fading. They were multiplying, as if invisible hands were dragging themselves upward, gripping for leverage they didn't need. The singing escalated. A swirling chorus now, surrounding the truck like a storm. My stomach churned. Knuckles went numb from gripping the wheel. I didn't dare stop, didn't dare slow. The desert siren kept pace with me, unseen now, but unmistakably near. Her voice threaded through the cab, rising and falling with unnatural precision, like a choir of hollow throats echoing inside the metal. The lights of Tonopah finally rose from the horizon. Gas station canopy lights glowed like salvation. I pulled in too fast, brakes screaming, trailer lurching behind me. The engine shuddered violently as I slammed it into park. The singing stopped, instantly, like a switch had been forced off. Only the hum of the canopy lights and the distant buzz of insects remained. My hands trembled uncontrollably as I opened the cab door and stepped into the warm desert night. I walked around the back of the trailer, dread settling deep in my chest. Every inch of the dusty aluminum surface was covered in handprints. Dozens, maybe hundreds, some pressed so hard they left faint indentations. All of them facing upward, fingers clawed toward the roof of the trailer, as if they'd been climbing, holding on, riding with me, and none of them matched human proportions exactly. Some were too long, some were too narrow, some had more than 5 fingers. I backed away slowly, breath shuddering. The desert behind the gas station was silent, still, black, but I swear, deep in that silence, just for a moment, I heard a single note, soft, familiar, waiting, a woman's voice, learning the next verse. I avoid Silver Peak Road now, even in daylight, especially at night, because whatever sits out there, singing on the rocks, isn't looking for conversation, is looking for a ride. And if it ever learns how to climb faster, I don't think any of us will get away in time. I've been driving long haul for most of my adult life. Freight across Nevada, California, Arizona. I know these deserts like the back of my hand. I know how heat plays tricks on you. I know how light bends over hot asphalt. I know how headlights distort silhouettes at night. But nothing in 26 years behind the wheel prepared me for what I saw near Furnace Creek Hill. If I close my eyes, I can still see him standing there. Still burning. Still silent. Still watching. This happened 3 summers ago. Middle of July. Death Valley kind of heat. Temperatures that make the air feel heavy and wrong even after sunset. I had a midnight run from Pahrump into California, carrying textile pallets. Light load. Easy ride. I was in a 2017 Peterbilt 579 then. Good truck. Clean cab. Faint diesel smell baked into the vents. A worn patch on the wheel where my hand always rested during long stretches. The AC struggled but held steady at a comfortable 72 degrees Fahrenheit. I started climbing Furnace Creek Hill around 12:45 a.m. The road ahead glowed under my high beams, shimmering in long waves. To my left, the desert stretched out like a frozen ocean. Empty, dark, unmoving. To my right, rock faces rose jagged and sharp. Radio was off. CB was quiet. The only sound was the steady hum of the tires and the low growl of the engine pulling me uphill. Then I saw the glow. A distant orange haze on the horizon, flickering faintly like a brush fire. At first I thought lightning had struck a patch of dry sage, or maybe someone had abandoned a burning roadside flare. It wasn't unusual out here to find idiots doing idiot things. But the glow didn't spread, didn't rise, didn't behave like fire. It just hovered, unchanging, waiting. Another 100 yards and I realized the glow wasn't on the ground. It was shaped, a tall, human-sized outline, burning. I eased off the throttle, foot hovering above the brake pedal. The road narrowed slightly around a bend before opening into a flat straightaway. My headlights washed across the figure, and my blood went cold. It was a man, standing in the middle of the highway, completely engulfed in flames from head to toe. Bright orange fire clinging to him like fabric. Not licking upward like real fire. Not crackling or distorting the air. Just wrapped around him, swirling slowly like it was alive. But the strangest part? He wasn't screaming. He wasn't moving at all. He just stood there, perfectly still, perfectly upright, facing my truck. I slammed the brakes, hard. ABS engaged with a violent shudder. My trailer fishtailed slightly before straightening out. The seatbelt dug into my collarbone as my rig slowed to a near crawl. The burning man didn't react, didn't flinch, didn't turn his head. The flames didn't spread across the road, didn't drip embers, didn't throw sparks. They clung to him like a second skin. My headlights hit him dead on, and the fire glowed brighter. So bright I had to squint. For a moment, I thought I saw charred skin beneath the flame. Blackened, cracked, unmoving. Then his arm began to rise. Slowly, deliberately, smoothly, he pointed at my windshield. My entire dashboard exploded in alarms. Every warning light lit up. Engine temp, oil pressure, ABS fault, brake system, battery voltage. The truck beeped so loudly I thought the speakers would blow. Inside the cab, the temperature shot upward. 72 degrees Fahrenheit, 81 degrees Fahrenheit, 94 degrees Fahrenheit, 116 degrees Fahrenheit. In seconds, the vents blasted furnace-hot air even though I hadn't touched the controls. Sweat poured instantly down my face. My water bottles warped and collapsed on themselves, plastic shriveling like they were being held over an open flame. "What the hell?" I choked, grabbing the wheel with both hands. The CB turned on by itself. The speaker crackled once, twice, then a single word came through. Deep, mechanical, echoing like it was spoken from inside a metal barrel. "Return." The word repeated. "Return, return, return." Over and over, each time louder, more distorted, like the voice was pressing against the inside of the speaker grill trying to force its way out. My heart hammered so violently I thought it might burst. "Return." I blinked. One quick reflexive blink, and when my eyes opened, the burning man was gone from the road, and was now standing beside my driver's door, still fully engulfed, still silent, still pointing. No movement, no running, no transition, just there. A burning silhouette inches from my window, so close I saw tiny waves of heat rising off the flames, though they made no sound, no crackling, no roar, just fire that wasn't fire. I didn't think, didn't reason, didn't hesitate. I slammed the truck into gear and floored the accelerator. The rig launched forward. My tires screeched. The trailer yanked violently as I took the hill faster than any sane driver should have. The cab rattled, engine whining in protest. I checked my mirror and nearly lost control of the truck. The burning man was running beside my trailer, keeping pace at 65 miles per hour. His feet didn't touch the ground. His arms didn't pump. He simply glided, flames trailing behind him like ribbons. His head remained locked forward, unblinking, expressionless. The fire around him pulsed brighter with each passing second. I pushed the pedal harder. 66 miles per hour. 67. 68. He kept up effortlessly. The temperature inside my cab remained brutally high. Sweat stung my eyes. My palms were slippery on the wheel. The dashboard lights flickered like dying stars. Then, with a sudden, violent burst, the flames around the figure blew outward, as if hit by a gust of invisible wind, and he vanished, like someone pinched out a candle. I didn't slow down again until I hit a busy stretch near Shoshone. The cab temperature dropped almost immediately back to normal. My dashboard reset. All the warnings vanished. The CB returned to static. I pulled into a rest stop at dawn, hands shaking so badly it took me 2 tries to unbuckle my seatbelt. The world looked normal again. Sun rising over the hills, a light morning breeze stirring the dust, a couple of early drivers fueling up. I walked to the back of my trailer, telling myself I'd imagined it. Heat stroke, exhaustion, reflection on the glass, anything. But then I saw it. On the steel side panel, melted into the metal itself, was a handprint. Large, blackened, perfectly formed. The steel around it had warped outward, bubbled like plastic held to a torch. I touched it. It was still warm. I don't take Furnace Creek Hill at night anymore. And if I ever see an orange glow in the distance again, I won't slow down, because some things standing in the road out there aren't asking for help. They're asking for you.